Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're dropping right into the rugged Aravalli Hills on June 18th, 1576. Based on our source texts, we're going to unpack an absolute masterclass in asymmetrical warfare, and honestly, one of the most intensely debated clashes in Indian history, the Battle of Haldighati.
Picture this, a suffocatingly narrow mountain gorge. The soil here is naturally yellow, kind of like turmeric, but on this specific day, the sources describe it literally turning red with blood. We're looking at a scenario where Maharana Pratap's vastly outnumbered forces clashed head-on with Emperor Akbar's massive imperial Mughal army. So how exactly did such a small force hold off a colossal empire? Let's find out. The sources highlight a staggering numerical disparity here. To put it into perspective, the Mughal army arrived with over 10,000 soldiers, heavy artillery, muskets, and hundreds of war elephants. Against all of that, Mewar fielded roughly 3,000 Rajput cavalry and just 400 indigenous Bhil archers. To even survive, the Mewar army had to rely entirely on that suffocating terrain we just mentioned to completely neutralize the Mughals' heavy weapons.
Section 1. Mughal expansion versus Mewar pride.
To understand why this bloody clash was inevitable, we have to hit rewind for a second. By the 1560s, Emperor Akbar was rapidly expanding the Mughal Empire. He was using this really effective mix of force, diplomacy, and marriage alliances with various Rajput states. But in 1568, the impregnable Mewar fort of Chittagard fell to the Mughals after a totally brutal siege. The sources note that this tragic loss, and the massacre that followed, only hardened the resolve of Maharana Pratap, who was crowned in 1572 to remain fiercely independent. There was no way he was giving in.
Inheriting a fractured kingdom and, frankly, an empty treasury, Pratap famously swore a severe oath of austerity. He vowed not to sleep on a bed or eat from silver and gold plates until Mewar was entirely free. And this wasn't just pride, It was a highly strategic move that united his fractured people. He heavily fortified the hills and, crucially, forged deep, lasting alliances with the indigenous Bhil tribes. They were the ones who taught him survival and warfare in those dense forests.
Section 2. Failed diplomacy and rising tensions. Now, before swords were actually drawn, Akbar did try diplomacy. He sent 4 major missions to demand Mewar's submission, but diplomacy collapsed entirely when Pratap absolutely refused to dine with Akbar's emissary, the Rajput Raja Man Singh. See, Pratap helped Man Singh had compromised his honor through his family's marital alliances with the Mughals. This snub resulted in some incredibly bitter insults being thrown around, ultimately culminating in a Mewar noble taunting Man Singh to bring his uncle Akbar to the battlefield. The promise of war was pretty much sealed right then and there.
The crucial takeaway here is how amazingly complex these battle lines actually were. It wasn't black and white. Raja Man Singh led the Mughal army against his fellow Rajputs, and Pratap's own estranged brother actually fought for the Mughals. On the flip side, fighting fiercely for Mewar was an Afghan Muslim commander, Hakim Khan Sur, right alongside indigenous tribal leaders like Rao Punja. So actually, scratch the idea of a simple religious war, it was a massively complex geopolitical clash of empire versus independence.
Section 3. Tactics, elephants, and direct combat.
Okay, let's head back to that narrow pass in 1576. The battle unfolded in these highly intense phases. It kicked off with a lightning-fast Rajput ambush right at the mouth of the gorge. This sudden shock completely scattered the Mughal front line, creating so much chaos that Mughal units actually crashed into each other. We're talking massive friendly fire.
As the battle spilled out of the pass and into the open plains of Kamnor, the warfare shifted to these devastating elephant duels, and the sources highlight the really tragic story of Ram Prasad, Mewar's prized war elephant. Captured after his rider was killed, Ram Prasad was presented to Akbar as a trophy, but the beast famously refused to eat or drink in captivity, literally starving itself to death 18 days later. It became this massive symbol of unyielding loyalty that shocked even the emperor.
And this next moment brilliantly illustrates the sheer cinematic intensity of the battle. Spotting the Mughal commander Man Singh up on his elephant, Maharana Pratap charged his famous horse Chetak directly at the beast. It's wild to think about, but Chetak remarkably leapt up, planting his front hooves right on the elephant's tusks. Pratap launched his spear, which narrowly missed Man Singh, but killed the elephant's driver instantly.
But right during this incredible strike, a sword attached to the elephant's trunk severely slashed Chetak's leg. Meanwhile, the Mughals were actually beginning to retreat from the fierce Mewar onslaught until a Mughal commander executed a brilliant piece of psychological warfare. He deliberately spread a false rumor by beating the war drums and shouting that Emperor Akbar had just arrived with a massive backup army. This psychological trick completely rallied the fleeing Mughal forces, turning the entire tide of the battle.
Facing overwhelming numbers that had just rallied and riding a mortally wounded horse, Pratap was convinced by his nobles to execute a tactical retreat. To make this even possible, a loyal commander named Jaywanta Bai literally took the royal umbrella from Pratap, disguising himself as the Maharana. He drew the entire Mughal onslaught toward himself, willingly dying in battle so Pratap could escape and fight another day.
Section 4. Sacrifice, Escape, and Guerrilla Warfare.
So while Haldighati ended without a decisive victory for either side, the immediate aftermath completely shifted the nature of the war. Pratap managed to escape the battlefield solely thanks to the legendary final act of his horse, Chetak. Despite having a completely severed, bleeding leg, Chetak summoned enough strength to leap across a wide, treacherous gorge, safely delivering his master to the hills before collapsing and breathing his last. Even today, monuments stand at that exact site, honoring the animal's incredible sacrifice. Refusing to surrender, Pratap utilized his intimate knowledge of the terrain to launch a relentless guerrilla war. The sources detail how his forces, especially those Bhil archers, constantly ambushed Mughal patrols. They effectively cut off all supply lines, completely trapping the supposedly victorious Mughal army within their newly conquered forts. It got so bad in the fort of Golconda that starving Mughal soldiers were forced to kill and eat their own horses just to survive. Talk about a reversal of fortune.
Section 5. The Resurgence and Enduring Legacy.
Akbar had won the battlefield, sure, but he completely failed to capture the spirit of Mewar. This set the stage for a massive counteroffensive a few years later, funded by a fiercely loyal minister named Bama Shah who literally gave his entire accumulated wealth to the state. Pratap rebuilt his army. In 1582, he struck back at the Battle of Dwar. The result? A shocking surrender of 36,000 Mughal soldiers to Mewar forces.
The sources describe Dwar as a crushing, undeniable victory. In a single day, Pratap's forces regained 36 Mughal outposts. The texts recount astonishing feats of combat during this clash, including a moment where Pratap reportedly struck the formidable Mughal commander Bahalo Khan with such immense force that his sword sliced straight through the commander's armor and his horse, literally splitting them entirely in two. Akbar's forces were dismantled. Following this massive victory, Pratap spent his final years actively restoring Mewar's prosperity from a new capital at Shavand. He tragically died in a hunting accident in 1597 at the age of 56, but his legacy was so profound that even when his son, Amar Singh, finally signed a peace treaty with the Mughals in 1615, after decades of exhausted warfare, the treaty explicitly stipulated that the Maharana of Mewar would never be forced to physically bow in the Mughal court. That is a direct, lasting echo of Pratap's lifelong vow of independence. The historical accounts leave us with this really fascinating, almost poetic anecdote. Court poets claim that upon hearing of his greatest rival's death, Emperor Akbar, sitting in his court in Lahore, actually wept. A court poet noted that because Pratap never bowed his turban or accepted the imperial mark, his death forced the mighty emperor to bow his own head in grief and profound respect for an unmatched rival. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. History is usually written by the architects of massive empires, but when we look at the source material detailing the sacrifices at Haldighati, the years of grueling guerrilla warfare, and that ultimate resurgence, what does the memory of this battle tell us about the ultimate power of resilience? Does a fiercely unyielding resistance ultimately outlast the very empires that try to crush it? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable piece of history with me today. Catch you next time.